all of you once again to biol4u.com. Okay, today we are going to explaining event in sexual reproduction. You know that the various events in the sexual reproduction are gamete formation, gamete transfer, and fertilization and post-fertilization change. Okay, so here in this video I am going to explain the fertilization and post-fertilization event. So what is actually the fertilization? Fertilization is the union of the male and female gamete. Okay, see here, this is the male gamete and that fuse with the female gamete, and finally it is producing a diploid zygote, because these gametes are haploid. You know, all gametes are haploid. So gametes are always haploid, and this haploid gamete unite with each other, fused with each other, and producing a diploid cell, and that diploid cell is known as the zygote. So this process of formation of diploid zygote from the union of the haploid male and female gamete is known as the fertilization. Okay, so this is the most vital event in sexual reproduction. Means this is the most important event in the sexual reproduction. Without the fertilization, diploid condition cannot maintain, and the organism cannot produce as a diploid individual. So to maintain the diploid condition of the individual, this fertilization is very essential. So fertilization is the most important crucial event in the process of the sexual reproduction. Okay, so this process also known as the syngamy. This is another word for the fertilization. So it is also known as the syngamy. So what is a syngamy? Syngamy means the fusion of the male and female gamete to produce a diploid zygote. So this is synonymous with fertilization, and this word syngamy and fertilization is interchangeably used. Okay, if syngamy does not occur, then what happens? The egg directly, for example, this is the egg, it is a haploid egg. If syngamy does not occur, this haploid female gamete directly developing into zygote, but the ploid is again, it is a haploid, because a haploid egg directly developing into a haploid zygote, that means the ploid is remaining same, because there is no fusion of the haploid and haploid cell. So if directly developing without syngamy, the product will be haploid. This type of the development is known as the parthenogenesis. If a development taken place directly from the haploid female gamete, and the young one is producing from the zygote, haploid zygote, and this haploid zygote producing the haploid individual, and this process is known as the parthenogenesis. Okay, so parthenogenesis means the formation of the young one without fertilization, directly from the egg, haploid egg, and this type of the parthenogenesis is exhibited by rotifer individual. A rotifer is a minor phyla. Okay, so members of the rotifers family, rotifers phylum, the minor phyla, rotifer is the minor phyla. So members of this minor phyla rotifers are showing parthenogenesis, and it also showing by the honeybee. You know the honey, and also in some lizard, not all lizard, some of the lizard is showing this type of the parthenogenesis, and also some of the birds also showing this type of the parthenogenesis. Example for the bird is the turkey bird. So the turkey bird that is showing the parthenogenesis. So rotifers, members of the rotifers phylum, and honeybee, and some of the lizard and some of the bird like turkey is showing the parthenogenesis. If you take the honeybee, you know the honeybee having 32 chromosomes. Suppose this is the diploid cell of the male. So this is the diploid cell of the male, and this is the diploid cell of the female. And here the gamete is producing by meiosis. So it is producing the gamete by meiosis, and as a result, after the meiosis, in the case of the male, the sperm forming that contains 16 chromosomes. Okay, so these are the haploid sperm. At the same time, the female producing the egg that is containing 16 chromosome. So that is a haploid. Suppose this fertilized with this egg and here forming 32 chromosome containing zygote. Okay, and similarly this fertilized with this one, here again forming 32 chromosome containing egg, and this zygote developing into diploid individual. That diploid individual is either queen or it may be worker. Okay, but when this unfertilized egg directly developing into an individual, that become the drone or it become the male. So the male is haploid because it is an unfertilized product. Okay, so this is one example for the parthenogenesis in the case of the honeybee. Only drone means male individual, and the queen and workers are the female that producing by the fertilization containing 32 chromosomes. So that is the parthenogenesis. Okay, so see this syngamy, it may be occurring outside the body or it may be occurring inside the body. So that means syngamy is two types. Means fertilization is two types. So what are the two types? One, it is external fertilization. Means the fertilization taken place outside the body in the water medium. Then it is known as external fertilization or external syngamy, or it may be taken place inside the body. Then it is known as the internal fertilization or internal syngamy. So syngamy or fertilization, two types. What is external? If fertilization taken place outside the body, it is known as external fertilization. If taken place inside the body, it is known as the internal fertilization. So see here, I will take one example for the external fertilization. So in the case of the fish, see here one example I taken. Here is the fish. So in the case of the fish, the female lays the egg, and also the male shed the sperm over the egg, and fertilization taken place in the water. Okay, so that is the external fertilization. Then what happens in the internal fertilization? I will take one example in the case of the human. See here, so this is the fallopian tube. So in the fallopian tube, fertilization taken place. So here the fertilization taken place inside the body, that is in the fallopian tube. So it is known as the internal fertilization. So fertilization, syngamy, two types. That is the external. If fertilization taken place outside the body, that is mostly in the water. The male shed the sperm over the egg produced by the female, and fertilization taken place in the water. But in the case of the human and mammals and higher animals, the egg present inside the fallopian tube, and if sperm present there, the sperm and egg fertilize, and here the zygote will form, zygote developing into young one. Okay, so here the zygote. So this is the fertilization here. So this diagram showing that fertilization process. So see here, this is the egg. The large one is the egg, and in the egg the sperm is entering, and it will produce a diploid zygote. So that diploid zygote will develop into individual. So that is the external reproduction and internal reproduction. So let us study something details about this process. So see here, in the case of the external reproduction, the reproduction taken place in the water. Okay, in the external medium, that is the water. The reproduction taken place in the water. So what happens in the water? The condition is different. It may be hot water, it may be cold water, or it may be the alkalinity may be increase or decrease, or the pH may be increase or decrease. So the condition is very drastic in the water, and moreover the water containing so many predators. So if the sperm is releasing or the egg is releasing, and even though fertilization taken place, all the zygote cannot be mature into young one. So there is a chance of loss of the sperm and egg is more, especially the sperm, loss of the sperm is more. So in the case of the male, it is producing abundant male gamete. So some of the gamete will survive, and if most of them is died or the washout, and some of them will remain, and the zygote will form, and that is helping to maintain the species or the individual. So in the case of the external fertilization, the number of the sperm and egg, that also large number comparing to the internal fertilization. Okay, because the predator present, the condition of the water is very drastically changing. So the survivability of the sperm and the egg is less comparing to the internal fertilization. So internal fertilization is having the great value of the survival comparing to the external fertilization. Okay, so internal fertilization in seed in the case of the reptiles, which organism showing this one? Reptile. Internal fertilization showing the reptile, and also showing by the birds and mammals. So these are the common organisms which are showing the internal fertilization, and external fertilization showing by in the water, that is Pisces means fishes and amphibia. In the higher organism, amphibia, it is showing the external fertilization, amphibia. Okay, so syngamy occurring in the case of the internal inside the body, and in the case of the external, the syngamy taken place inside the or within in the water or outside the body. So here the egg is forming, egg is producing in the internal, egg is producing inside, and fertilization is also taken place internal inside, and a zygote will forming here. So here the zygote will form, and this zygote undergoing development. Okay, and this development of the zygote finally resulting in the formation of young one, and this young one will grow and become the adult and again reproduce, and it will reach to the senescent condition or the old age, and that will die. So this is the in the case of the animal. Then what happens in the case of the plant? In the case of the plant, pollination taken place. So by the pollination, the pollen grains is releasing that reach to the stigma. Pollination, it reaching to the stigma. In the stigma, the pollen grain mature and it germinating and producing the pollen tube, and through the pollen tube, the gamete pollen tube, through the pollen tube, the gamete is releasing into the ovary. Gamete releasing into the ovary, and inside the ovary the fertilization, that means the ovary containing ovule, and in the ovule the fertilization taken place. So that is the case in the higher animals and higher plants, how the fertilization taken place. So that is the fertilization event. So then let us study the post fertilization event. So now let us study the post fertilization event. Okay, post fertilization event. So what are the changes that taken place during post fertilization? So what is the word meaning of post fertilization? For post fertilization means the changes that taken place, event taken place after the fertilization, that is known as the post fertilization event. After the fertilization, that is known as a post. Post means after, pre means before. Okay, so even after the formation of the zygote, after the formation of the zygote is called, means whatever the changes that taken place in the zygote after the fertilization, that is known as the post fertilization event. Okay, so one of the event we will explain the zygote itself. Okay, zygote is formed by the fertilization. So about the zygote, see here, the zygote formation is a universal in all the sexually reproducing organism. It is a universal. That means all the sexually reproducing organism showing the zygote formation. So it is a universal phenomena, universal process, or it is a universal phenomenon. All the sexually reproducing organism showing this zygote formation. Okay, organism having external fertilization, zygote is forming in the water. Okay, so if fertilization taken place the external medium, that is in the water, and the zygote formation taken place in the water. So zygote is formed in the water medium or near to the water. If water is not available and the zygote is producing near to the water, near to water. If water is not available, it will take place near to the water. Okay, near to water. Or if internal fertilization, that will take place internal. If internal fertilization, the zygote formation taken place inside the body. Okay, inside the body. So most commonly it is in the fallopian tube, inside the body. Okay, that is the internal fertilization and external fertilization difference in the zygote formation. Okay, so the development of the zygote, next stage, the zygote must be developed. Okay, so the development of the zygote is depending on some factors. So what are the factors that affecting on the development of the zygote? Factors affecting zygote development, affecting zygote development. So what are the factors affecting the zygote development? See here, the zygote development is affecting, one of the factors is the life cycle. What is the nature of the life cycle of the organism? Nature of the life cycle. This is the one factor that affecting the development of the zygote. Okay. The another factor is the environment. What is the nature of the environment? If environment, whether the environment is hot or it is cold, or what is the condition of the environment? This environmental condition and the nature of the life cycle that affecting on the development of the zygote. Okay. See here, if zygote in fungi, for example, if you take some examples like fungi and algae. If you take these two examples, the zygote develop a thick wall. Suppose this is the zygote, and this zygote develop a thick wall around this. Okay, it produces a thick wall around. This is the zygote. It produces a thick wall around this. Why it producing the thick wall? This thick wall helping to protect the zygote from desiccation. Desiccation means removal of the loss of the excess water, that is known as the desiccation. So this thick wall protect the zygote from desiccation, or we can say that dehydration. It protect the zygote from the dehydration, and also it helping to protect from the external medium, that is it protect from the damage. How the damage is happening? Because the external medium is, the condition of the external medium is not constant, it alter continuously, and during this alteration of the external temperature or the medium, the egg or the zygote may damage. So this outer covering protect the zygote from the damage due to the external environment, and also helping to protect the loss of excess loss of the water, that is it protect from the desiccation or from the dehydration. Okay. So in haplontic life cycle, if you take the life cycle, that is a haplontic life cycle. We already studied life cycle in the algae, that is a haplontic life cycle. So what happened in the haplontic life cycle? Haplontic life cycle. Let us take the haplontic life cycle. What is the nature of the haplontic life cycle? So see, in the haplontic life cycle, what happens in the haplontic life cycle? So haplontic life cycle is showing by some algae, because algae is a haploid in nature. So haplontic life cycle, it is observing in the case of the some of the algae, not all algae. So what happens in the haplontic life cycle? The zygote formed by fertilization, and this zygote, it is a diploid in nature, and this zygote undergoing meiosis. Okay, this undergoing meiosis, this is known as the zygotic meiosis. Okay, it undergoing meiosis, and after the meiosis, it produces spores, and these spores are the actually what is haploid in nature. So this type of the meiosis taken place in the zygote, that is known as the zygotic meiosis, and that producing haploid spore, and this haploid spore germinating to produce the algae, or it producing the individual, and this individual naturally it is a haploid in nature. This type of the life cycle is known as what is haplontic life cycle, that grow into haploid individual. So here if that is the condition, we can say that this zygote is the link that ensure the continuity of the species between organism of one generation to the other generation, that is the next generation. So this zygote acting as a link between the two generations. So the one generation that is producing the another generation, and this first generation producing the haploid individual, means the gamete that fuse with each other and forming the diploid zygote, and this diploid zygote developing into young one in the case of the diploid organism. But if the organism is a haploid, it undergoing meiosis and producing the haploid spore, and this haploid spore developing into an individual, that is the haploid. So it is depending upon the life cycle, the zygote development of the zygote taken place. If a haplontic life cycle, zygote undergoing meiosis. If a diplontic life cycle, zygote directly developing into individual. Okay, so the post fertilization event means zygote development, that is depending on the life cycle, and also it depending on the environment. Okay, and this fertilization that ensure the diploid condition, maintaining the species generation after generation. Okay, So from this point, it is very clear that all the organism, sexually reproducing organism, start or begins their life from the zygote, and this zygote is a single-celled structure. So all the living organism, all the sexually reproducing organisms start their life from the single cell structure. That is, single cell structure is known as the zygote, that is diploid. In the case of the haplontic life cycle, that is haploid. Then it undergoing meiosis, and it is diploid life cycle, that directly developing into young one. So all the sexually reproducing organism start their life from the diploid cell, that is known as the zygote. Okay, and this development of the zygote into young one, that is known as the embryogenesis. And the study of this development is known as the embryology. And you see here, in all the sexually reproducing organism, the life start from the zygote, and this zygote undergoing the development and producing the young one. This development of the zygote into young one, that is known as the embryogenesis. And this process is known as the embryology. So what is embryology? The study of the development of the zygote into an embryo or into a young one, that is known as the embryology. So what actually happening during this embryogenesis? During this process, embryogenesis, two processes taken place. That is the mitosis or the cell division. Mitosis, or it is called cell division. Cell divide by mitosis. So it is mitosis or cell division. At the same time, here differentiation also taken place. Differentiation. So what is this process, mitosis and differentiation? You know, the mitosis producing one cell converting into two cells. So mitosis helping to increase the number of the cell. So number of cells increasing by mitosis. At the same time, during the differentiation, after the mitosis, it is producing the cells that change into a particular organ or tissue. That change from the cells to organ or tissue is known as the differentiation. So differentiation and mitosis, these are the two processes that are taken place during the embryogenesis. Okay, so differentiation leading to the development of tissue or organs. Okay, animals are classified into oviparous and viviparous based on development of the zygote outside or inside the body of the female parent. Okay, so nature of the development of this zygote divides the animals into two types, that is the oviparous and viviparous. Let us see what is oviparous and viviparous. So what is actually oviparous and viviparous? Let us take first oviparous. So oviparous means the formation of the sexual reproduction that involves the egg laying process. Then it is known as the oviparous, egg laying. Those animals that lay the eggs, it is known as oviparous. For example, the bird lay the eggs. Okay, at the same time, reptiles that lay the eggs, so these are oviparous. And amphibia that lay the eggs, these are the oviparous. All these organisms lay the egg outside amphibia. In the case of the reptiles and amphibia, the egg is developing in the aquatic medium, and in the case of the bird, that is on the land. Okay, so those organisms that lay the eggs is known as the oviparous animal, and viviparous animal means the organism in which delivery taken place. So the organism deliver the young one, it is known as the viviparous animal, delivery. So those organisms deliver the young one, then it is known as the viviparous organism. So oviparous and viviparous. In the case of the oviparous, it produces the egg having calcareous shell, the shell made up of the calcium carbonate, that is known as a calcareous shell. So it is very hard, that it taken place in the bird, reptiles and amphibia. So in the case of the viviparous, the zygote developing into young one, and this young one after a particular time it will deliver. Okay, after some period of time the delivery taken place, the delivery to baby is taken place. So the survival of the young one greater in the case of the viviparous comparing to the oviparous, because in oviparous the egg is laying outside the body. So there are a lot of problems outside, the temperature variation and other condition variation, and also some of the predators. So the survival value in the case of the oviparous is less. comparing to the viviparous, because in the case of the viviparous, development taken place inside the body of the mother, so it is a highly protective, so survival value in the viviparous is more when comparing to the oviparous. Okay, so that is the case in the animal plants. So animal, so that is the case in the animal. Then let us take some examples in the plant. So how taken place this process in the plant. So in flowering plant, let us take the condition in the flowering plant, means angiospermic plant, flowering plant. What is the condition in flowering plant? So in flowering plants, you know, the zygote is formed inside the ovule. Okay, so here flowering plant, the zygote formed inside the ovary. Okay, inside the ovary. After the fertilization, the accessory whorls, you know, the flower having accessory whorls or non-essential whorl and essential whorl. The accessory whorl will fall down, or the non-essential whorl, that is the corolla and calyx, that will fall. It will fall down, and the remaining part, that is the androecium and gynoecium. After the fertilization, the androecium also will fall down. Androecium not remaining there. Androecium also will fall down. Okay. Then the remaining part, that is the ovary. So see here, this is the stigma, and this is the style, and that following an enlarged part, that is known as the ovary. And this ovary containing the ovule. Okay. So this ovary will remaining there, and this style and stigma, that also will withered, or it will dry out. Okay, and from this ovary, the mature ovary, from the ovary it is producing the fruit. So fruit is developing from the ovary, and this ovule mature into seed. So after the fertilization, the ovary mature into fruit and ovule mature into seed. So mature fertilized mature fruit, mature ovary is known as the fruit, and fertilized mature ovule is known as the seed. So like that, fruit and seed will produce. In some fruits, it having distinct layers on the fruit, and these layers are known as the pericarpus. For example, in the case of the mango, the seed present inside, and outside the seed you can see the three layers, that is the endocarp. This is the endocarp, we already studied in the morphology, and this is the mesocarp, and this is the epicarp, and all these layers together known as the pericarp. So it is producing the pericarp. So this is the pericarp. Okay, so that is some fruits showing these distinct layers. Some plants, these layers are dried out, so that it cannot seen separately. And these seeds and the mesophyte, it is a very sweet in taste, and all these structures are helping for the dispersal of the seed. The animal will eat, and this seed will fall distant from the plant, mother plant. So it is helping for the dispersal of the seed, and also it cannot germinating under the same plant. It is germinating at a distant place, so that helping to develop the plant, young ones, and helping for the dispersal of the plant very neatly. Okay, so here some examples I will take here, that is the in the case of the plant. So see here, this is the fruit. It is actually the fruit of the pea plant, and these are the ovule, mature ovule, that becomes seed, and the outer covering, that is not edible, it become dry out. So this is the another example for that. This is the ovary. Complete structure is the ovary, and here you can see the ovule. Okay, and this again, so these are the distinct different examples for the fruit and seed formation. So after the fertilization, the ovary will change into fruit, and the ovule will change into seed. So that is the post fertilization event. Okay, that is completing the fertilization and post fertilization event, and finally the result is the fruit and seed.